We learn from elders. We learn from survival. We learned from each other. For trans guys. Wisdom you can feel. Real talk. Collective care. Here we go. Welcome to Four Trans Guys. I'm Megan.
I'm Zander.
I'm JJ.
And I'm Willy.
I'm so excited for our audience to hear today's conversation. It's a series of several coming podcasts that were recorded live in really cool spaces. And this first episode of us sort of being on the road is in the Tenderloin Museum, which, if you haven't been there, is a very cool spot in San Francisco, a place. It's part of the very first transgender district in the entire world. And it has really cool art on the walls. You can see it if you're watching this on YouTube. But we really recommend that you check it out if you're ever in town. In addition to being a place that is displaying unique histories from the Black community, the trans community, the LGBTQ rights community, and all the ways that intersection sort of unfolded from the 1800s through until today in this very cool part of San Francisco. They do really unique talks and art. And some of them, if you are not local or in person, you can even watch online. They do, like Susan Stryker does talks, who is a trans historian, and they do like book performances and conversations about places that no longer exist, but people want to share the stories of. And so it was the perfect place to have a conversation with Willy Wilkinson, who was someone who was very formative in my trans journey. So his book, Born on the Edge of Race and Gender, was really formative in my that came out around the time when I was in grad school in Berkeley and like living near Zander. And so it was like, it wasn't actually this, but it felt like where we were living in Berkeley, going to school, was sort of like the renaissance of trans maleness and masculinity, because Lauren Cameron came out with a book called Body Alchemy. And it was this book that showed pictures of trans men. Like Lauren Cameron was like a bodybuilding dude. I think Zander talked about his being inspirational in Zander's journey. But inside the book, you could see like Stephen Thorne, the very first out trans police officer in the San Francisco Police Department. And so it was like radically different trans male bodies and radically different trans male lives. And in a time when you couldn't just like, if you Googled trans men, you would only get porn or really terribly gruesome surgery photos that hadn't healed yet. You couldn't really find like safe, healthy community. This book came out and it was all about like how beautiful our bodies are, even though they weren't all just one body type. So it stood in a very stark contrast to like the kind of models you would find in Vogue magazine, and even like the kind of people you would see in the LGBTQ papers. Because even today, most people, when they think of trans icons or trans elders, only ever name trans women. Very few people know the trans men who are a part of those journeys. And so it feels really great that in like a formative part of my personal life, I kind of encountered some of the authors that you're going to be hearing from over the next couple of weeks of podcasts, and people who are very diverse in who and how they are in the world, but also are like doing art in different stages, in different decades, in different ways that they were super public and now maybe less public, or the opposite. They were less public before and now they're more. And so it's fascinating to not only like hear the stories of people who are trans guys, but also to dig a little deeper into their stories that like reminds them that they're still seen, even though most of the world has forgotten that trans elders exist. And these are guys who were famous in the early 2000s, and most folk have forgotten to continue to celebrate them. And Willy Um, is known in a lot of circles still, does a lot of like conference works. You can listen about how you can participate into that more, does a lot of art stuff still. And I felt like he was really inviting people in the conversation that we had. But I just wanted to like put a little preface on this conversation just to like let people know how sort of iconic and cool it is that we were able to record conversations with icons in a way that like celebrates what they brought into the world and how it transformed community, but also like who they are now and the ways that they're still living into that.
Yeah. And I'm so excited to be part of this journey because living in Texas, it felt like I lived under a rock. And so many of these folks, these elders that I've not had a kind of intimate engagement with, what a wonderful opportunity to be able to sit next to them at
Yeah.
the Tenderloin Museum and to be able to share that space. And, Willie just won recently an award and stood on the steps of City Hall in San Francisco, winning this award. It's just really remarkable to be able to share space with icons like Willie. So, is it okay if I share a little bit about what Willie's doing?
Yeah, enough talking about Willy. Let's
Yeah.
make it so people can listen to this amazing conversation.
Well, Willie Wilkinson has a master's of public health, is an award-winning author, speaker, and public health consultant who has been advocating for marginalized populations since the early days of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. He is the author of the Lambda Literary Award-winning book Born on the Edge of Race and Gender: A Voice for Cultural Competency, which illuminates trans experience from a Chinese American and mixed heritage perspective. He launched the first trans healthcare access program in the nation and the first program for trans men who have sex with other men, organized the first support groups for transmasculine people of color, and founded the API Transfusion, the first retreat for Asian and Pacific Islander transmasculine people. Well, without ado, let's go ahead and listen to Willie because this is phenomenal. Amazing. Well, Willie, it is so great to have you here. And I wanted to better understand a little bit about where you're coming from, particularly about like, how do you practice healing? Like, what does healing look like for you as a trans guy?
Well, I love to swim. I love swimming in the bay almost every day. And, as someone who has who's experienced a lot of harm, I, use that as a spiritual practice to dump all the negative and take in all the positive. And there's always so much positive. The sky, the sun, the birds, the water. And it's just a really fun thing for me to play in the water. And, so that's been one of my healing paths. And also I love dancing. So for me, dancing out whatever, like I try not to keep trauma on my body, and so that's how I release it. And at 63, I'm in the best shape of my life because I have been, really trying to work through a lot of stuff that has come my way, and so I use body movement to really release it, and also being in community. And I've been organizing API Transfusion, which I started in 2017, and now we're doing this amazing event in July this year, and we're currently at about 100 registrants, and so this is like a really amazing historical moment, because the first one was like 38 people and it's built from there, so it's really amazing how word of mouth is traveling, and it's becoming more diverse, and it's really exciting, all the energy people are bringing as performers, as workshop presenters, and just the power of community. That is huge. So it's nice to see how that's really rippling for folks, where they're developing friendships and forming, really family bonds by really being in community and just having fun. Having fun together is a powerful thing, and being in person is so necessary. So that feels really powerful for me, the kind of building community, being in community.
Well, and if I could, it sounds like you're moving from a kind of survival mode into something of a thriving mode. Can you tell us what, like, any experiences of transitioning from that? I mean, that's a profound shift for most people, let alone trans folks. So could you tell us a little bit more, if you're willing to, a little bit more, how you got in that shift? How did you become aware of that shift? And are you there? Are you in a thriving space now? You said you're in the best time of your life, best physical shape of your life.
Well, I mean, I'm coming out of experiencing a lot of harm. And I feel like, you know, it's a process, right? Healing is a process. And for me, it's about embodiment. It's about releasing stuff that's not mine. I think one of the things I learned about writing a memoir is that it's the power of authorship, right? The power of telling our own truth. But at the same time, since really, you know, publishing and getting an award and all of that, you know, so much has changed. I mean, I wrote it during the Obama years when we thought we had arrived and we're just going to keep, you know, continuing to experience all these victories. So much has changed on a political level, nationally and globally. But also for me, there were so many people that have attempted to rewrite my story since I really told my truth. And I really realized the power of, well, for one, the power of authorship was, for me as a memoirist, you know, I thought I had to wait till my mom passed in order to really tell the truth about her abuse. But the positive thing that happened was that my dad read the book to my mom, and she would say this refrain, I mean, literally every day for decades, "That's not my baby." And he got her to stop and really question and look at that. So for me, that felt like a powerful moment of authorship. But at the same time, I'm seeing how we're constantly being rewritten. Our stories as trans people, as people of color, as people assigned female at birth, we're being rewritten, and those stories, those false narratives are used to justify harm. You know, it makes cruelty reasonable and necessary, even virtuous, when people tell false narratives about us. So that's why I wanted to write a second edition, because I want to really look at like where we were, where we've come, what's happening now, and how we need to really reclaim that authorship.
It really speaks volumes here in this location. Like today we're recording live at the Tenderloin Museum in San Francisco, and for those who are listening via audio, hop on the YouTube if you want to see like what's really up. Is like behind you is the Compton's cafeteria and the Vanguard Youth and California Hall and Del and Phyllis Lyon. But I think part of the poetry of our speaking in this space is like so often people dwell in trans names and stories after we die. Or after the history is long gone, and then we want to celebrate it. And so, like, I just think there's something beautiful about us getting together and coming to a place like this and reminding people, like, we're still here, we've got bodies, like, the work is happening right now. And I think memoirs are such a beautiful way of reflecting on that as well.
Yeah, you know, when I was working on the streets of the Tenderloin in the 80s, during the early days of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, it was 53% Asian, not so much Pacific Islander, but Asian, Southeast Asian primarily. Yeah. Some Pacific Islander folks, mostly Southeast Asian, and yeah, that's the story that we don't necessarily hear about, the folks that were really struggling to survive. But at the same time, they were getting the tools as well. They were understanding what was happening. And, you know, we were working within community to really address the misconceptions about HIV/AIDS and so forth. Yeah. So, I mean, it's cool to be in this museum, you know, just that the fact that it exists and that we have this history, but we need to keep showing what that history looks like.
That's the nice thing about the fact that it's expanding and they have so many diverse conversations here, is we can like add to the story and make sure all of the beautiful diversity kind of keeps happening. And so I'm grateful your memoir work has been able to do that.
Thank you.
I know in my journey, I won't say what decade of my life it was, but in my journey, reading your books was always very helpful for me personally, just because there weren't a million people writing memoirs, right? And I feel like you're a part of a really amazing kind of group of authors that like told your stories not from the like celebrity side of a trans memoir, but from like a really like rugged lived experience side. And so I was hoping you would tell us a little bit about like that process of memoir writing, or I a little birdie told me you're even maybe heading towards a second edition.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's about centering authorship, because we're seeing how families, institutions, political movements, communities are really rewriting our stories and using that to harm us. And so how can we really retain that authorship? But writing a memoir, I mean, for me, it was really not just about telling my personal story. It was about using the power of storytelling to illuminate, from a personal perspective, the larger social and political patterns, and use that as a microcosm to look at the larger. And so, that's really, I guess, that's really been how I've worked as an opinion writer, as an author, as a poet, as a trainer, as a speaker, to really look at how can these personal stories illuminate the broader picture. And so that's why I wanted to jump in with a second edition, to really look at, well, where have we come over the last decade since this book came out? How have our lives changed, and what's happening politically, but what's also happening in an intimate way in our lives? What's happening in our intimate relationships? What's happening in our families? Because we're seeing this disintegration of belonging, of trust in our truth, from all these institutions, all these different spheres. And how can we hold on to that? Because honestly, as somebody who's been training folks on LGBTQ issues with an emphasis on transgender issues since the 80s, I work a lot with behavioral health clinicians, and I think one of the challenges has been to really help folks understand the impact of being misgendered, because there's no oppression that's quite like it, and yes, it's an experience of not being seen, but it's also an experience of people having the audacity to insist they know better than you do who you are. And this is what we're seeing happening, how misrepresentation is happening in this broad scale way, and it's being used to harm us based on false narratives. And so that's really where I wanted to dive into, like, what is it that we need to do in terms of retaining authorship of our lives? So, I mean, and just to keep on, just to say, I'm creating this way of, it's an evolving art form, really, a performance art that I'm using to really deliver my poetic prose or poetry. And I tried this out for the first time at the NCAPIA conference, which stands for National Queer Asian Pacific Islander Alliance. And there was a conference locally in Oakland a couple months ago in April. And I jumped on stage and tried out this new art form, and I'm doing it again for API Transfusion in July. But it's like, I really wanted to bring the poem to the stage in a way that was more than just reading a piece. When you write a book, you're asking readers to witness a story, but when you perform with your body, you're asking the audience to witness a body. Because my body is a living archive. You cannot argue with that. Our bodies are being constantly judged, politicized, misrepresented. We're told we're something other than who we are, but here's my body that actually tells my truth. And so that's why I wanted to create this art form, which is really kind of this combination of qigong, movement, breath, dance, various different movements to tell a story. And I started out with this piece, The Poetry of Scars, which was it's really about the complexities of the scars that we carry. Some are the harmful scars and some are the celebratory scars, right? We have so many different types of scars, and we find a way to continue living through those scars. But some of those, scars come with, great celebrations too.
Yeah, absolutely. Willy, you've talked about how there's been, evolutions or changes, so to speak, politically, socially, physically, and maybe identity-wise and healing, right? I'm curious, because you've been involved in the work that you've been involved in, which has brought you into community or communities, right, as trans person within trans community, but of course there's been a lot of evolution of trans community. And what have you seen we can use both pros and cons of the evolution of the trans community that you've been part of, that you've created. Like, what are some of the evolutions that you've seen, and where do you see us going, or what would you like to see us going, in which direction? Like,
Yeah, it was interesting. I was just talking about the trans march with someone yesterday, and just how exciting that experience is for folks who haven't had the opportunity to really feel empowered in their trans self. And I was thinking, I remember the first one. There was 100 people. We walked down to City Hall, and it was exciting, and it was so small. Back in the 90s. Well, this was not then, but back in way back. The community was so small. Like, we really knew everybody. And so now to see it just be so large and diverse and so powerful, and more folks really exploring their gender and asking questions about it. I love that. I love that we've seen an evolution of freedom to be whoever you are, whatever's authentic for you. I mean, there's certainly elements in the community that push back against that freedom, but I've loved seeing that, the expansion of different identities. I think, I've also seen people repeat patterns, like, going through a lot of trauma and drama around racism, around lack of inclusion, like I, went through that in the 80s and the 90s, and I've seen that happen over the decades where people experience harm and then they don't come back. And, it's like, that's a hard thing. We lose people because of some of the painful experiences. But, even, when we have painful experiences, for me, I always come back, because it is that place of home. It is that place of family for me. And many different communities, I feel that way about. I want to see us continue to build that, because there's a part of me that feels like it's the 80s in a way. We have built so many allies. It's different than how it was. But there was that sense of, like, when you saw somebody you thought might be part of the community, it was like, are they family? But it was more like, you're asking somebody else, because if you ask them directly, that might be too big a risk, and it's like we had that sense of family, right? And I feel like, we're really, with API transfusion, now some of us, are older and we come from that history, but it's wonderfully intergenerational, from like low 20s to mid 60s in terms of age. And, I think part of that is really like, back in the day, we were on a phone attached to the wall. We were building it in people's living rooms, and now it's like, let's come together and let's just experience each other in person and just see where that goes. Because we have a million conversations. There's ways people are just connecting in so many different ways, and we're having fun. And for me, I think like it's so important to build that now. I feel like the most healing is happening when folks are getting together in community. Like, I love these retreats, these transmasculine retreats. Like, we're in the woods and we're having a good time, just chilling, talking about whatever, or just playing, right? Just having fun. I feel like that is so important, that community building and bonding and just relaxing with each other, where we don't think about all the noise out there and all the bullshit. Oh, can I say that? Yeah. All the BS, all the crap that we're experiencing from outside forces that really don't have anything to do with us. And I think our job is to be like, that is not mine to take on. I feel like part of my healing journey, to come back to your question, is really like, how can I release myself from those false narratives? How can I not let that stuff stick to me? Because as a young person, I had to do what I had to do to get fed. I had to ingest that false story. And sometimes, we learn to do that, and then it's only later we go, wait, hey, that is not actually mine. I don't need to take that on, right? And so for us as trans people, we got to keep on saying, no, this is who I am. Deal with it, right?
Absolutely. One of the things I love also about going into those spaces, as you refer to them, like transmasc, I'll just say, trans male spaces where we're camping or we're relaxing, we're playing.
Yeah.
I've had the experience, even within the broader trans community, of that being tagged as somehow problematic, right? That of trans men getting together. It's the stuff around male privilege, or I don't know what else, but just like for us, like we're on a podcast called For Trans Guys, and some people might have a problem with that within this broader narrative. Like you said, it's like this beautiful thing where people are becoming who they are, asserting who they are. Have you had any of that kind of pushback on who you are or how you present yourself is somehow different from what the community around you wants you to be, right? Because you're saying you don't want things to stick, right? You're not letting things stick. But when the messages are closer to home, your mother or members of our community, even in the local sphere, how does it not stick?
I mean, I guess that's the big challenge. It's easier said than done. And I think a lot of times we're having narratives imposed upon us by people who are close to us, and we don't even realize it till we actually stand back and look at them. I think the idea of getting together based on a shared experience is a powerful thing. Yeah. I mean, we did that as women, we did that as lesbians, we did that as people of color, we did that, we do that as trans guys, we do that as transmasculine more broadly. I think it's great. Like, there's a beautiful thing when you come together with a group of people where there's a certain amount of stuff you don't have to explain, and you can start from that place. So the idea of getting together in groups that are specific. Yeah. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I mean, group. It's empowering, right? Yeah. It is empowering. Yeah. So, again, that's noise. I think, but there's also a lot of misconception about trans guys. It's like, we have experienced female subjugation. We have experienced subjugation for being different with our gender. We have also experienced male privilege, many of us. And, but at the same time, it doesn't change what we've experience. It doesn't erase our past, and it doesn't erase the forces who continue to try to subjugate us in those ways. I mean, we've experienced the hierarchy of cisgender men trying to put us down and say, well, no, you're not actually, you're just this. That kind of ongoing reinforcement of a hierarchy. I think there's a lot of complicated experiences that we experience as trans folks, as trans men, that is not well understood.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's part of why I'm really excited that we're able to kind of like weave together space that allows for more conversation to take place. And I hope that you will share with folk the best way that they can contact you. Like, what's these days, what's a publicly shareable way that you're interested in people reaching out if they want to learn more about?
I mean, I've been slow to jump on social media in more recent years, but I do plan to unveil stuff on Instagram at Willy Wilkinson, which is also my Facebook. I also have a Facebook author page, Willy Wilkinson MPH. But my website also is just kind of the central organizing space, is willywilkinson.com. So those are my deets. I have been kind of not so online in recent years, less visible, while experiencing some challenging stuff in my life. But I think that's about to change as I am working towards this forthcoming second edition, and also just wanting to do more performance poetry. It's a lot of fun for me. So that's where I'm heading towards. We're a little early, in that conversation, but that's really what I'm working towards. Yeah.
Are you going to be videotaping some of your performances?
Yeah.
Because I won't be able to be at the space, but I'd love to see it. Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, we'll be doing that this upcoming one, and nice. Probably more to come. Yeah.
Good.
Well, I won't speak for everyone here, but my favorite thing about Four Trans Guys when we have our fourth trans guy guest is to let them have the last word.
Yeah.
Meaning you get to say whatever you want, and we promise not to contradict you. Or at least to end the video that we share with the public right before we contradict you. But is there anything that you would like to say as your final words to me?
Yeah, I mean, I guess along the theme of what we're talking about, and really I think what you're doing here with this podcast is you're really telling the truth about who we are, right? So my message is, go ahead and reclaim authorship on your own life.